Chapter 9. When I'd called to schedule a meeting with the Aniquitos of the local pack, one Mr. Clayton Pierce, I'd spoken with Vanna, his wife. She'd told me he doesn't keep an office like the last Aniquitos I'd met with, but to come by their house. She gave me the address and a time to be there. From the way she spoke, I suspected he ran his pack much like Bill did. Bill ruled mostly with loyalty and fairness, not that he couldn't be harsh or brutal when needed, but it wasn't his first reaction. When we got in the rental car the next morning, I entered the address into the map system on my PCD, and we followed the directions to the Aniquitos' house. We left Troy outside beside the car while Devon and I went to the door. I knocked, and we didn't have to wait long before the door was answered by a severe-looking woman in her 50s. Her dark hair was streaked with gray and pulled tight away from her face. "Hello, I called a couple of days ago. I have an appointment to meet with Clayton Pierce." I smiled, trying to look friendly and non-threatening. "You would be Nicki Daniels?" She lifted one brow in question. "I am, and this is Devon Wilson." She pushed the screen door open and invited us inside. "Follow me." She led us through the house to a large kitchen, where two men sat at a long table to one side of the room. "Clayton, this is Nicki Daniels and Devon Wilson," the older woman said, before going to work on something at the counter. A round man approaching 60 turned away from the muscle-bound younger man to look at us. "Who are you?" His tone was abrupt and unfriendly. Knowing that Devon was only there as my security, not an ambassador, I stepped forward slightly, not much, but enough so I wasn't side by side with Devon anymore. "I'm Nicki Daniels. I'm visiting your territory and wanted to pay my respects." "What are you doing here?" His tone didn't get any friendlier. "I have an appointment with a genealogist. I'm looking into my family history. I'm hoping to find enough for a Christmas present for my parents." "Why here?" "My grandparents came from not too far from here. I understand it's easier if you have someone in the area who can check local records and cemeteries that might not be listed on the web yet." "Who's that behind you?" The Aniquitos looked suspicious. I didn't turn to look at Devon as I spoke. "This is Devon Wilson, he's my mate." "You're Daniels and he's Wilson? You two not married?" His tone still gruff. I couldn't tell if he was that unfriendly or if it was just his way. "Not yet, sir, we're still planning the wedding." I didn't feel the need to explain further. "Is it just the two of you?" The Aniquitos wanted to know. "No, sir." I kept my tone respectful. "My Aniquitos sent another enforcer with us. He's outside with the car." "Another?" "Yes, sir. Devon is an enforcer for our pack as well." "And why do you warrant two enforcers?" I would have been suspicious, but he seemed more curious. "Our Aniquitos is worried about my safety. He's like a second father to me, and the last time I went out of town, we encountered some problems. A banished pack member hired some thugs to kidnap me." The Aniquitos' brows lifted as if intrigued. "Looks like it didn't work." He looked me up and down. "They got me, but I managed to free myself. One of the kidnappers died in the process. We haven't found the banished pack member yet, so Bill sent an extra enforcer along in an attempt to keep it from happening again." Pierce seemed to accept the answer, though he didn't look pleased. "How long will you be around? What kind of trouble can I expect from you?" "Maybe a week or so, and none, I hope. I'm not looking for trouble, and I hope none finds me." I didn't know what else to say. I could have told him why we were really there, but I didn't want to have to explain it all before I'd met Alice and determined if she could even be shifted. "Very well, don't cause any problems and you can stay." He wasn't welcoming, but he didn't tell us to get out of his territory. "Thank you, sir. I'll see you out." The woman spoke as she turned away from the counter where she had been cutting vegetables. She led the way back to the front door and let us out. I waited until we were in the car and pulling away from the curb before I spoke again. Not the friendliest of people, but he didn't tell us to get the hell out. There is that, Devon said. What next? Troy wanted to know. Now, I have an appointment this afternoon with Alice. I didn't know how long the meeting with the Anikitos would take, and I didn't want to schedule them too closely and be late to see Alice. Devon nodded. So, what do we want to do between now and then? I waited a moment, looking back and forth between the two of them before I said it. Eat, I grinned, knowing Devon would find my appetite amusing. I wouldn't say no to a nap. Devon laughed. Somehow I knew you'd want food. He looked around. Let's see if we can find someplace to stop. After lunch, we made the short drive to Roscoe for my meeting with the non-shifter. She'd suggested we meet at the local library so we could get started right away. I had agreed, thinking that with this kind of work, she likely didn't keep an office, and knowing that I wouldn't want to give strangers my home address. We arrived a few minutes early and went inside. Devon stayed with me while Troy found a magazine and sat in a comfortable-looking chair where he could see the door and most of the interior. I knew he was trying to be inconspicuous. No one thinks much of a couple, but a woman with two men draws attention. I glanced around the room, wondering if she was there. Then it occurred to me, Roscoe was smaller than Safford, and I knew that even if Alice wasn't in the library, chances were, if Alice did a lot of research here, then the librarians would likely know her. I went to the front desk, Devon still at my side, and waited until someone came to help. Can I help you? A middle-aged woman in dark dress slacks and a pale blue blouse asked, stepping up to the other side of the tall desk. I'm looking for Alice Treadway. Might you know where I can find her? Sure, Alice is here a lot, she looked around the room. That's her over there. She pointed to the far end of the room, where several tables were set up and a woman sat at one of them. Thank you very much. I replied with a smile and headed in Alice's direction. I realized as I got closer, she looked a lot younger than what I knew her age was. She looked more like she was in her mid-30s than her mid-40s. She had ash blonde hair pulled back into a short ponytail, keeping it out of her face as she looked things up, I was sure. She was a little overweight, but carried it well. Miss Treadway? I kept my voice soft, so I wouldn't disturb the other patrons. Devon stayed nearby, but not close enough to draw attention. She looked up with a hesitant smile. Her bright, clear blue eyes caught me by surprise and captured my attention. Yes. I'm Nicki Daniels. Oh. She stood and extended one hand. I took it and shook it briefly. The instant my skin touched hers, I knew that she could be shifted. I could sense the wolf inside her and knew that I could call it. It's nice to meet you, she said. Thank you so much for agreeing to look into my family history. My parents will love anything you can help me find. I'm hoping to be able to give at least some of it to them for Christmas. It's what I love doing, and it's so nice to be able to make a living doing something you love. She shrugged. I'm sure it is. I took what you gave me when you called, and I did some looking. She motioned to the table in front of her. Would you like to see what I've found so far? We sat at the table and went over what she'd learned. It was interesting to find out about the lives of my great-grandparents. I discovered that I felt a connection to the people she had found, even though they weren't actually related to me. When I finished with Alice, giving her the rest of the information I had, and asking her to work as far back as she could in the next few weeks, but to leave me time to put it all together and make a gift out of it, we left. Devon fell into step beside me as I made my way to the entrance. Troy set his magazine aside and followed us as we passed him on our way out the door. Well? Devon waited until we were in the car to ask. I can do it. Now I just have to go back and talk to Pierce again. That's not something I'm looking forward to. Back at the hotel, I called Pierce's number again, explained who I was, and requested another meeting. No, it wasn't another courtesy meeting, I explained, and no, there was no trouble, but I did have something I thought he needed to hear. I spoke to the same woman I had the first time, his electo, and I suspected the same woman who had answered the door that morning, though she could have been some kind of help. She seemed reluctant, but she told me to come back the next morning. I could see him then. Troy didn't seem to understand what was going on, but I wasn't in the mood to explain it. He'd find out if and when we shifted Alice. If not before, I didn't really care as long as I didn't have to tell him. I was going to have to with both the Aniquitos and Alice. I didn't want to have to go through it all a third time. We ordered dinner to be delivered, and I went to change clothes, ready to get comfortable for the evening. The next morning found me knocking on the Aniquitos' front door again. The same woman opened the door. She looked tired, as if she hadn't slept much. "You sure you need to see him? He's not in a good mood today." "I'm sorry, but yes. I really do need to speak with your Aniquitos." She opened the screen and let Devon and I in, leading us into the kitchen again. The Aniquitos sat at the table, with the same younger man seated near him and another on his other side. "You again?" The Aniquitos growled. "What kind of trouble have you run into?" He seemed to expect trouble over anything else. "No trouble, sir, but I have something I need to talk to you about." "Well, spit it out." "I don't have all day." He all but snarled. I took a deep breath and let it out in a rush. I might as well just spit it out. "Well, I didn't lie to you about why I came. I didn't tell you the whole truth either." His face clouded. I couldn't tell if he was being grumpy or if he was really angry. "What didn't you tell me?" "First, I need to ask, are you aware you have a non-shifter in your territory?" "Of course I am." He said it as if I'd asked a stupid question, but I knew better. I knew that once someone was determined to be a non-shifter, many of them lost ties with any pack at all. Alice has always been a part of the Sweetwater pack. That explained it. She was from here, likely her parents were part of this pack too. All right. I accepted the unexpected answer. The genealogist I met with yesterday was Ms. Treadway. I figured as much. I think she's the only one in the area that hires out to do that. I nodded. The thing is, I chose her for a reason. I wanted to meet her. Why her? He seemed suspicious. Because she's a non-shifter. I'd like to make her an offer, but I need your permission first. What kind of offer? I'd like to offer her a chance to shift. Not possible. I won't have you getting her hopes up and swindling her, only to let her down in the end. I'm not asking for payment, and I assure you it can be done. While I was a little offended that he thought I was trying to con them, I was pleased at the same time. That the pack leader would refuse to let someone hurt a member of his pack was good. It made me feel better about him, despite his off-putting attitude. "You have any proof?" he asked. I didn't blame him for wanting some kind of evidence. I can't guarantee that it will work, but I'd like to try. But only if she wants to. I've only done it twice. Twice, huh? Can I talk to them? I turned, motioning to Devon where he stood behind me. Devon was the first. Pierce gave Devon an appraising look. "You were a non-shifter and she shifted you?" "Yes, sir." "How long ago?" Devon was quiet for a moment. I knew he was counting the time in his head. "About 3 months." The man beside the Aniquitos looked shocked. "You've only been able to shift for 3 months, and you're already an enforcer? You're full of shit." He scoffed. "Gordon." The Aniquitos snapped. The man beside him fell silent and looked down at the table. "While I share my enforcer's skepticism, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, if you can give me a plausible explanation." I spent 10 years with the army, sir. I learned every bit of hand-to-hand combat and fighting skill I could pick up. I'd planned to make a career out of it, but an injury that didn't heal right got me discharged. I returned home and ran into Nicki again. Again? I went to school with her older sister. She was still pretty young when I left town. Anyway, she'd only recently discovered the kitsune and shifted the first time herself. The Anakitos scowled. She recognized my scent as kitsune and, not knowing I didn't shift, she invited me to dinner. If her sister went to school with you, why didn't she know what we are? Pierce wanted to know. I was adopted as a baby, I put in. My parents and all my siblings are human. My dad is friends with our Anakitos. Bill kept an eye on me, waiting for signs that I would shift so he could explain the whole thing to me. That day finally came a little over 4 months ago. So you're a new shifter too? Pierce asked. I nodded, not really sure what he was getting at, but determined to be honest anyway. He turned back to Devon. So, how did you manage to make Enforcer so soon? Are the standards for Enforcer that low in your pack? Well, sir, I used the training I'd received in the army. I let it translate into my new strength, and I fought 2 of our pack's enforcers until our Theron called a halt to the fight. One of the men he fought was one of Bill's personal security team. I couldn't stop myself from contributing. Bill? He said the name as if he didn't know who I was talking about. I don't know if he knew Bill or not. Our Anakitos. I clarified. He lets you call him by his given name? I've always called him Bill. After I learned about the kitsune, he wanted that to continue. I guess that explains the 2 enforcers. He sounded grim. So, you want to give Alice the opportunity to try to shift again? You said you've only done it twice. I assume that means you've succeeded twice. How many times have you failed? I've only made the offer to 3. Devon, our Lysandro's sister, and a man in Seattle. So, you failed once? I guess 66% isn't too bad, but it's not great either. No, sir. You misunderstand. I've made the offer 3 times, but our Lysandro's sister chose not to try. She's married to a human and has small children. She doesn't feel the need to shift. You've actually tried to shift non-shifters twice and succeeded twice? Yes, sir. Any chance I can talk to the guy in Seattle? I don't see why not. I pulled my PCD out of my pocket and scrolled through the contacts until I found the one I was looking for. His name's Reese Donovan. Reese Donovan? The Anakitos repeated. Yes, do you know him? Not personally, but I know of him. He's from a nearby pack, or he was. He's been gone quite a while. I nodded and gave him the number I had for Donovan. Assuming I give permission for you to make the offer to Alice, what else will you need from me? If Alice decides she wants to try, we'll need somewhere to do the shift and permission for our pack's Harmonia and her enforcer to visit. She's our pack healer, and she helps me with the actual shift. How does she help? It's not as easy as simply calling their animal forms. If it was, they would have already shifted. I have what seems to be the rare ability to sense their animal forms before they've shifted. All I do is call it. But there's also some kind of defect keeping them from shifting in the normal manner. While I call their animal form, she repairs whatever it is keeping them from shifting. She tells me that she can't sense the flaw until I am actually attempting to call their animal, though. I guess that makes a little more sense than just that you can do it. He said grudgingly. I'm sorry I wasn't clearer. Give your number to my wife. He nodded at the woman sitting at the other end of the table. I'll talk to Reese and let you know what I decide. I thanked him and gave my number to the Electo as she led us back to the door. Troy stood from where he had been leaning against the car, waiting. We got into the car and left without another word. We were almost back to the hotel before I spoke. What do you think? Will he let us? Hard to tell, Devon said. He seems skeptical, but after he talks to Reese, I think he'll agree. I hope so. Nicki. I felt a hand on my arm, my body moved. Someone was shaking me. Nicki. I realized it was Devon's voice, and I fought to open my eyes. How long have I been asleep? I blinked hard. About an hour. I wouldn't have woken you, but Pierce called. I pushed myself upright. He did? He decided? Devon nodded. He did. He said you can make the offer, but he doesn't want you pressuring her. I assured him that's one of your big things. It has to be their decision. No one can pressure them, not even you. I sat blinking, trying to make my brain work. I needed to set up a meeting with Alice, one not in public. My PCD? I asked. Devon pulled it from his pocket and laid it in my hand. I wondered if I could get her to come to my hotel room. I dialed the number and waited for an answer. Hello, came a high girlish voice. Hello, I'm looking for Alice Treadway? Sure, hang on a sec. No problem. More distantly, as if she was holding the device away from her mouth, I heard her shout, Mom? It's for you. A moment later, a new voice came on the line. This is Alice. Ms. Treadway, this is Nicki Daniels. Her voice warmed. Nicki, what can I do for you? I didn't really know how to say it. I didn't want to scare her, but I didn't want to say too much either. I need to meet with you again. I have some things I need to talk to you about. More information about your family? I hadn't told her I'd been adopted. She assumed that the family history I was having her research was mine, not just my parents. Actually, no. I don't understand. She sounded confused. I know, and I'm sorry I can't explain more on a call. I'll be able to say more in person. Do you want to meet me at the library again? Actually, it needs to be somewhere we can talk without being overheard. I don't know. Her voice was reluctant. I knew that I would be reluctant to meet with strangers alone, even people I'd met even once. It just wasn't safe. If it will make you feel better, you can call Clayton Pierce and have him send someone with you. That was the only way I could think of to let her know, without actually saying it, that this was kitsune business. You know Mr. Pierce? She asked. I've met with him. I got his permission to talk to you. Oh. She sounded even more confused. We have a room in Sweetwater if you'd like to come here, but I want you to be comfortable. I guess I could come there. Do you mind if I bring my husband? If Mr. Pierce wouldn't mind, I certainly don't. I didn't know if her husband was kitsune or if he knew about us, but if the local Anikitos wouldn't object to his presence, I had no reason to. She agreed to come that evening, and I gave her our hotel and room number so she could find us. After ringing off, I showered and changed while we waited. It helped to wake me up, and I was able to get ready so that after we finished with the Treadways, we could go eat. I was starting to feel like all I did was eat and sleep. I hoped that my hunger would slow some soon. I'd just finished straightening the bed from my nap when a knock sounded on the door. Devon answered it and let the Treadways in. I knew the instant he got close enough for me to scent him that Alice's husband was kitsune. Now I understood why Pierce didn't mind her bringing him. He looked a little older than she did. Considering what I knew about her age, I estimated he was in his late 40s, maybe 6 feet tall, with the beginnings of a belly, not much but noticeable. His blonde hair was a few shades lighter than hers was, and he had dusky gray eyes. If his skin hadn't been tanned dark, I would have said he was almost albino. The sun that had darkened his skin could be partially responsible for the light shade of his hair, but not his eyes. Hello. I greeted them. Thank you for coming. This is Devon, my mate and fiancé. We'd opted to close the door to Troy's room, not all the way but until it touched, so he could still hear what was going on and would be able to help if something went wrong. We didn't want to overwhelm the couple with too many people, or the idea that I needed security if we didn't have to. This is Greg, my husband. Alice introduced the man with her. Nice to meet you, Greg. I extended my hand, he took it in a firm grasp and we shook. I looked at Alice, motioning for her and Greg to sit in the pair of chairs we'd borrowed from Troy's room for the visit. I'm sorry about all the mystery, but I couldn't tell you this over an open line. You wouldn't have believed me if I had. All right. Her words were simple enough, but her body language told me that she was nervous and more than ready to know what was going on. I've gotten your Aniquito's permission to offer you a chance to shift. I had decided it would be better to just say it. That's not possible. We've already tried everything. I can't shift. She sounded certain. I had no doubt she believed she was right. Up until a few months ago she had been. I think it is possible, but I can't guarantee it. I'm offering you another chance. We've only done this twice, but it can be done. You've shifted 2 non-shifters? Devon only shifted the first time a few months ago. I motioned to him. They both looked at him, aghast. Really? Greg asked. Really? Devon confirmed. How? Greg's eyes narrowed in suspicion. I knew I was going to have to share the whole story, so I spoke up. Let me start at the beginning. I told them everything, how I was adopted and didn't know about the kitsune until I shifted. Then my feeling that I could call Devon's animal form and what it had taken to do that. So you see, I'm not offering you false hope. I really think I can do this for you. What will it cost us? Alice's tone made me think she was afraid that now that I'd convinced her it really could happen, it would be too expensive. Nothing. I saw the disbelief on their faces. Really, it won't cost you anything. They looked at each other a moment, as if they each knew what the other was thinking. I realize this is a big decision, and I'm not asking you to make it now, I assured them. Go home, talk about it. Give it a few days. You can call me when you decide what you want to do. I didn't want them to feel pressured to make a quick decision. They looked at each other a moment longer before Alice turned back to me. No need. I know what I want. If there's any chance at all, I want to try it. You're sure? I wanted to be certain. Positive. 2 of my children shift already, and we have no reason to believe that our youngest won't. I want to be able to shift with my family, to run with them as wolves. I want to experience our mating as I was meant to know it. She was so passionate, so sure of herself that I knew this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, but something she had been wanting for a long time. Probably most of her life. I need to be certain that you're aware it might not work. I didn't want her counting on something that could fall through. I understand. I'd given up hope. We've tried everything we thought possible, and I'll risk this too. If it doesn't work, I'll be disappointed, but it won't be the end of the world. All right then. I really didn't know what to say. I need to contact my Harmonia and arrange for her to come out and talk to your Aniquitos about where to do this. When can we do it? Greg wanted to know. I'm not sure. It's going to depend on how long it takes our Harmonia to get here and when your Aniquitos gives me a location. He nodded and looked back at his wife. All right. She stood. I'll wait for your call then. Greg stood next to her. I'll let you know as soon as I know more. I walked them to the door and let them out, closing the door and locking it before turning back to Devon. Well, that went better than I expected. I leaned against the door for a moment before pushing myself upright and helping Devon return the borrowed chairs to Troy's room. Before we left for dinner, I called the local Aniquitos and requested a place to perform the shift. He said he had a place and we could do it as soon as I was ready, so I sent Alexis a quick message. It read, "She agreed and I have a site. We can do it as soon as you can get here." I knew it wouldn't take Alexis long to make the trip, and hopefully we could get this done in the next day or so, and start home. Despite not having been gone more than a couple days, I was ready to go home. Hours later, well fed and exhausted, I found sleep an elusive demon. I was so tired these days I usually slept far more than I was used to, but tonight my brain wouldn't slow down enough to let me sleep. I tried to lie still in the unfamiliar hotel room bed, not wanting to keep Devon from sleeping. I knew he had to be tired too. I started to count backwards slowly from 100. It was a trick that often calmed my mind enough to let me sleep, but not tonight. Tonight I couldn't keep thoughts of Annie out of my head. Things I hadn't thought of in years were running through my mind. The two of us in school. On the bus on our way to an out-of-town tennis match. Her laughing at some forgotten joke. The picture that had appeared with her obituary, and an imagined version of her beaten, dead, and lying on the ground, waiting to be found. Frustrated, I sighed and moved slightly, trying to find a position that might help me fall asleep. I must have disturbed Devon because he rolled over and wrapped an arm over my body, pulling me snug against him. The warmth of his body curled around mine made me feel secure, protected. I wiggled a little, getting closer. "You all right, baby?" He breathed against my skin. "I'm okay, just having a hard time sleeping. Anything I can do to help?" "I think you just did." I let him hold me against him and thought about how safe I felt, and finally I drifted off to sleep.